Ever since the fiasco of Whisper Me a Love Song, where sadly the poor adaptation basically didn't do the story justice, I've been actually looking for good Yuri stories from this genre, and while in the past I have watched a few Yuri animes, I decided to go even more deeper and also read some Yuri mangas as well. And quite recently I actually finished a story that is titled The Summer You Were There, and despite this Yuri manga only being over 30 chapters long, it was still a roller coaster of a story. Sometimes it could go from wholesome to very depressing, and then later on to bittersweet. It's something that really just demonstrates that you don't need to be over 100 chapters long in order for your story to be good. Just a good chunk of chapters can not only make you appreciate the story, but also glad that you read it, since it not only had a solid beginning but also had a solid ending as well. In this story, The Summer You Were There, we start off with our character named Shizuku, who has made it a habit to isolate herself and not really talk to anybody around her class or even the school at all. Very quickly we see that she's in her own world in a way, and that she doesn't seem to be paying attention to anything around her, but there seems to be some people who are keeping an eye on her, or to be more specific, one particular girl in Shizuku's class is noticing her, and it seems that she actually does have a bit of her attention, and this girl is Kaori. Unlike Shizuku, Kaori is the opposite of her, as unlike Shizuku, Kaori seems to be very popular, and she does have a friend group as well, and has built a good reputation around people, but it seems that for whatever reason, Kaori always seems to be fixated on what Shizuku is doing, something that Shizuku notices but then quickly brushes it off as nothing too important, as she only focuses on one thing that she's been doing for quite a while, and that is writing a novel. But things get really dark when Shizuku reveals that this is the first and last time that she's going to write a novel, because she plans on just simply disappearing, which only just makes you wonder what's going on with Shizuku and what has caused her to have this mindset and believe that this is something that she has to do. It's very clear that something is haunting her, but for now we just don't know what. The only thing that we do know is that she plans on making this novel her first and last. However, while this novel was being kept a secret and no one knew that Shizuku was writing this, one girl will find out, and that girl is none other than Kaori, who happens to discover its existence, and this proceeds to Kaori wanting to read the entirety, which of course frightens Shizuku, but there's no point since Kaori already took the copy that she already has. At first, Shizuku is scared that Kaori is going to be very critical of her story and that she's going to be harsh on what she wrote, but as it turns out, Kaori decides to actually see Shizuku once again and tells her that her story was really great and that she was really moved by it, which of course confuses Shizuku, since basically the story was just simply her venting out her feelings and emotions and what she's been thinking. Something that even Kaori notices it when she says about her thoughts on the story, thinking that it was actually something very depressing to read, but she then requests Shizuku to write another story. Instead of being all sad and gloomy, she wants her to write a romance story, something that at first Shizuku doesn't want to do whatsoever, and she outright admits to Kaori that she doesn't want to write any more stories, and that the one that she did write was going to be the only one. Not to mention that she can't even write a romance story since she's never experienced romance before in her life. But surprisingly, this will lead to Kaori insisting that both her and Shizuku should go out, as this could be a way for Shizuku to experience romance, and this could be a great way for her to write the next story. This of course catches Shizuku off guard, and she wonders why Kaori made this decision, but no matter how many times she's tried to get a specific answer, it seems that Kaori always dodges it and just gives her a very vague answer. But despite all this, Kaori does make a few rules, seeing that Shizuku isn't completely on board with it. Stuff like, for example, only this being a pretend relationship just to get some experience, but also calling it off once summer vacation is over. And while Shizuku still has her doubts, she reluctantly agrees, but at the same time also wondering how far this whole relationship is really going to go. And for a while things are alright, and it seems that actually Shizuku doesn't mind being around Kaori, and despite them being two completely different people, surprisingly they actually have good chemistry, and it seems that both of them are having fun despite this technically not being an actual relationship. But that is until one day both Shizuku and Kaori are going out and visit the aquarium, and for the most part everything is still fine and they seem to be enjoying themselves, despite Shizuku admitting to Kaori that she barely goes out. But surprisingly, despite her not having too much experience going out, she's having a great time with Kaori. That is until towards the very end of their outing that Kaori reveals to Shizuku that she's a really nice person and that she's very kind. But these exact words would be something that would really haunt Shizuku, and it seems that no matter how hard she tried to not think about it, Kaori telling her that she's a nice person really seems to have struck a nerve, as she starts to behave very differently, as she reveals to Kaori that she is not a nice person, and in fact she thinks she's a terrible person deep inside. Something that Kaori was not expecting her to hear, but something that also Shizuku would ever think of letting somebody else know about what she's truly feeling inside. As in these moments, Shizuku tells Kaori that she's not a great person because back then when she was still a kid, she actually bullied someone to the point that it's still haunting her to this day. But surprisingly, as if things couldn't get more shocking, Kaori tells her that she already knew. Something that of course Shizuku is also surprised by hearing, but due to her dark memory, instead of Shizuku asking more questions as to how Kaori even knows about her past, she just simply runs away, leaving Kaori behind and all alone. And here we see that Kaori really is even more of an interesting person, as at first she just simply thinks this was somebody that Shizuku met during her high school days. But as it turns out, it seems that Kaori does fully know who she is, and there's a reason why for a while Kaori was always focusing on Shizuku and paying attention to what she was doing. However, it's here that's finally revealed as to what's been haunting Shizuku all these years and why she's always never been able to fully forgive herself for what she's done. Back when she was still a kid, Shizuku was a completely different person. She was more outspoken and she said everything that was in her mind. And while of course this is something that isn't really bad to do, some of the things that Shizuku says sometimes was often seen as her having a very sharp tongue. And one girl in particular would interpret it like this because no matter how many times she and Shizuku talked, it seemed that in a way Shizuku was always looking down on her. And this girl, who goes by the name of Ruri, seems at first to just simply let it all happen, as she doesn't really want to cause any problems. That is until one day when Ruri was in lunch duty and she had to take the curry to the classroom. But due to Ruri sometimes being slow, Shizuku tried to help by making her go faster. But this will backfire as Ruri trips, thus the curry being spilled all over the floor, and this becomes the center of attention. But this becomes even more intense when a girl finally confronts Shizuku, telling her to stop bullying Ruri, which of course confuses Shizuku, as in her mind she was only trying to help, but it seems that in other people's minds this was actually what's going on. Shizuku was just being a bully and just bullying Ruri for no particular reason. And this will be a long lasting effect to Shizuku, as not only would she be seen as the bad guy, but over the years she would also try to make sure that she was in a school that had nobody from her elementary school that knew about the incident, because the last thing she wants is to be reminded that she was a terrible person when she was a kid. Even if that wasn't her intentions, it wasn't going to change from other people's perspectives of what happened. So instead of dealing with all that negativity, Shizuku just simply decided to hide and run away from her problems and just isolate herself in hoping that everything would just go away. And that was basically what she was doing for a good portion of her life, just keeping everything that she was feeling and thinking to herself and not venting it out to somebody, not even to her family, as she felt there was no point in doing that because it was just simply going to bring back bad memories. But later on, we actually do get these beautiful moments with Shizuku and Kaori when they decide to meet each other once again and confront the problem, in which Kaori gets really emotional, telling Shizuku that she shouldn't hate herself and she shouldn't think that she's an evil person for what happened in elementary school, because she was not evil. It's just that she just didn't know what she was doing was painting her in a bad light. But even despite hearing all this, Kaori never actually thought that Shizuku was this person. She had her doubts and found it hard to believe that Shizuku was the type of person to be a bully, and she was able to confirm this with the time that they spent with each other, as she could tell that Shizuku wasn't a bad girl, but she was just somebody that really didn't understand what actually happened to the full extent until she was growing up. And I really like how these moments are really impactful, because we see this side of Kaori that we didn't really see in the beginning. Usually she's very cheery and has a smile on her face, but here we see Kaori really be concerned for Shizuku and really vent out how she truly feels about her and telling her to not throw her life away, as she could tell that from reading Shizuku's first story that a lot of the dark thoughts and depressing thoughts that were in that story were basically most likely Shizuku's thoughts as well. And of course, because she was having these dark depressing thoughts, the last thing Kaori wanted to see was her actually believing that this was a solution to her problems, which for Kaori was not, because that was just something that was going to bring more pain and suffering. And after this very heartfelt conversation, both Kaori and Shizuku's relationship started to grow stronger. In fact, they actually even go out to a festival in which, upon seeing the fireworks, Shizuku hoped that they could do this again next year. But here's where we get a bit of foreshadowing based on Kaori's expressions, as we could tell that this is something that she was not expecting to hear, but also we could actually see this as something that would sadly never happen. But before we talk about any of that, we have to focus on Shizuku's redemption, as when Shizuku finds out that Kaori still has in contact the girl that she used to bully, this being Ruri, this will lead to Kaori insisting to Shizuku that maybe she and her could talk and finally patch things out after all these years. But this of course frightens Shizuku, as not only has she not talked to this girl for so many years, but she doesn't really want to talk to her, as obviously this would be a very awkward conversation to have, but this would also be something that most likely Ruri doesn't want, as the last thing that a bully victim wants is to talk to somebody that used to bully them. And this is something that even Shizuku agrees, as this is something that she also has in her mind. But due to Kaori's insistence that the only way Shizuku will ever feel better about herself and will let all this go behind her is if she finally confronts it head on, something that Shizuku realizes once Kaori says it out loud, and also with the idea that she doesn't have to directly talk to Ruri, as the only thing they could just do is just simply give her a letter that Shizuku writes apologizing and hoping for forgiveness. But of course, this is something that Shizuku does struggle at first, as she wants this apology letter to be genuine and doesn't want to be seen as just her trying to make herself feel better and just to make it all about herself, because she wants to put Ruri in her priorities so that she could hopefully see that she's changed and that she actually does feel remorse for what she did. And when this confrontation does happen, with Ruri still having the girl who confronted Shizuku all those years ago, Sari, this just makes her even have more fear about what's about to happen. But with Kaori on her side and her comforting her that everything is going to be okay, Shizuku continues by of course declaring her apology and giving Ruri her letter. Of course, Sari is not really convinced, and she still is able to throw a few harsh words towards Shizuku, which of course Shizuku doesn't fight back, as she knew this was bound to happen when this was all going to go down. But fortunately, both Shizuku and Ruri are given a chance to talk things privately, and here we see that Ruri still hasn't really forgiven Shizuku, doesn't really plan on doing it for quite a while, but accepts that Shizuku doesn't have any ulterior motives into doing this, and thus that's the final chapter of both of them. But Shizuku is satisfied because even though she didn't get the solution that she wanted, which is her being able to be forgiven by Ruri, she knew that was something that was not going to be easy to do, because even she herself knows that she wasn't even able to forgive herself for quite a while. So it's no surprise that the person who was bullied and was the victim of it was not going to be easily forgiving and understanding of Shizuku. But the most important thing to come out of this situation was that Shizuku was able to put her head up high. She was able to realize that it's okay to not be forgiven, because forgiveness is not something anybody can easily do, but also as long as she's able to do what she felt was the right thing to do and finally put this all behind, that's what's most important. And just when it seems that things are finally going good and she doesn't have to worry about anything bad going to happen from now on, when both Kaori and Shizuku are about to leave, Kaori collapses, not only frightening Shizuku but also wondering what is going on. And it will be until later that Shizuku will finally find out the truth of what's been going on with Kaori and what she's been hiding all this time and not telling her about it. And that is that Kaori is suffering an illness that is fatal and she only has a limited time to live. This of course just shatters Shizuku's world, as finally, now that she's able to find peace and wants to spend her happy times with the girl that she has gotten a good bond with, now it's all going to be taken because of the disease that Kaori is suffering. And this is not something that's only heartbreaking for Shizuku, but it's heartbreaking for everybody, and it seems that everyone knew for quite a while that it was bound to happen, that Kaori was going to not last very long. And this just only makes things worse when Shizuku, when she's talking to Kaori is just simply prioritizing Shizuku and her hardships, not worrying about herself, which of course angers Shizuku in a way, because Kaori no longer needs to worry about her, she needs to worry about herself, something that Kaori can't simply do because it always seems to be a habit of hers to put others first and then herself later. But of course now it's not the time for her to be doing this because her life is on the line, and Kaori knows this. But just like Shizuku in the past, she doesn't want to realize it, and she doesn't want to deeply think about it because she knows that it hurts, and she just simply wants to forget about it and not have to worry about it, but she knows she has to. And this will lead to Shizuku declaring that before anything happens, she is going to finish the romance story between them and not regret it in any way, which makes Kaori happy. And all this time we see in these chapters, we see Kaori and Shizuku now spending more time. Despite her being in a hospital, Shizuku visits her oftentimes whenever she can, with new content of her story, which of course brings a smile to Kaori's face. But there is still a lingering problem that Shizuku has, and that is how she's going to end the story, because she doesn't really know what she should really be including in this story, and if she really should be venting out her true feelings on Kaori and their relationship, as it will be in this time that Shizuku would realize that she sees Kaori as somebody special, not just as a good friend or the girl that saved her, but also somebody that she has romantic feelings for and wishes to be with her as her partner, which is something that she was always trying to hide and not really think things deeply. But now that she's realizing that Kaori doesn't have that much time, she wants to express these feelings before it's too late, but is scared as to how Kaori is going to react when she shows that she has romantic feelings for her. But instead of focusing on just this entirely, she just continues to write the story until she gets to that ending. But in the meantime, the more time that they spend together, the more time they both cherish these memories. But even despite all this happening, it doesn't mean that there's still no issues whatsoever, as at one point Shizuku gets confronted by Kaori's little sister and doesn't like her because of the fact that Kaori spent more time with Shizuku rather than her, which of course the old Shizuku would have probably not wanted to deal with this and would have probably run away from the situation. But here we see that Shizuku is understanding as to why Kaori's little sister is so angry at her, because she knows deep down that she just truly cares about Kaori, and she just truly cares about her sister being able to spend more time with her, because even though she's young, she knows that Kaori may not be here any longer to have more memories with her, and that just simply hurts her. And that is why Shizuku is able to be so understanding and even hugs her, because that's exactly what she's feeling as well, and that is something that they could both relate. But while both of these people were able to be understanding, something else also unexpected happens. When Shizuku, Kaori, Seri, and Ruri are spending time together and spending it outside, they all decide to go to the aquarium, as it's not only a good memory between Shizuku and Kaori, but this was just a great way to spend with everybody together. And it's here that Ruri opens up to Shizuku once they're alone that she actually wants to get to know Shizuku. And while she wasn't really entirely sure if this was the right move, she now knows deeply that Shizuku has completely changed. Something that's not just only her discovering, but also other people around Shizuku. Like very early on, her family, more specifically her sister, reveals to Shizuku that everybody in the family was extremely worried about her because of just how she's been acting and how she was never the same ever since the incident happened. But because Kaori became part of her life, she became a different person. And now Shizuku, realizing this, now sees that there are people out there that truly did care for her, and in all this time she should have just simply been worrying about the people who cared about her, rather than just her thinking all this time that she was all alone and she had nobody to open up to, when in reality that was not the case. She did have people that were genuinely concerned for her and wanted her to have a good life. So when Ruri announced that she wanted to get to know Shizuku even more, it's something that really just made Shizuku realize that change can happen, and while the things in the past can never be undone, it's not something that should be something that you have to be haunted by. Something that in this moment both Shizuku and Ruri realized, and they realized that from now on they both can create good memories to overcome the bad memories between each other. But sadly, despite all this good stuff happening to Shizuku, Kaori's health starts to decline rapidly after another moment in which it seemed that she was about to pass away. This of course raises concerns for everybody, especially Shizuku, as she's not been able to complete the story between her and Kaori, but due to the amount of time that she now has, which is basically none at this point, finally she decides that's now really time to open up to Kaori about how she truly feels about her. And even though it's in writing, Shizuku writes to Kaori that she loves her and sends the story to Kaori. And when Shizuku wanted to see Kaori once again, this time unfortunately Kaori passes away. And this was a hard-hitting moment for Shizuku, so much so that she really just closed herself off once again, but not because of any issues of herself, but because someone special is no longer part of her world. This news is so shocking to her that she didn't even attend Kaori's funeral because she didn't want to believe that this was happening to her. But of course, later on, she would get confronted by none other than Seri once again, in which she drags her out of her room and out of her house to go see Kaori's house, in which not only does she see a memorial for Kaori that was put up, but also Kaori's sister gives her her diary that she's been writing. And in here, we really see a good reflection as to what was really going on in the mind of Kaori, in which despite her positive attitude and her happy smile, she was scared deep inside of dying. She didn't want to die. She was suffering and she was in a lot of pain because apart from dying, she didn't want to see the people close to her suffer because she will no longer be around. Not her friends, not her family, but more importantly, she didn't want to see Shizuku go on a downward spiral because of her death. Which is why all this time she wanted to help Shizuku in every way she can for the limited time that she had, because she wanted Shizuku to be a different person, not only for her sake but for Shizuku's sake as well, and wanted Shizuku to be very happy because, as she would reveal in this diary, that she knew Shizuku when she was at a young age. She always admired Shizuku based on what she saw in her and the kind of person that she was, but due to her issues with her health, she oftentimes was not in school, and for a good while she did not know what happened to Shizuku. That was when she encountered her once again when they were both at the same school, this time being much more older, and now she prioritized into helping Shizuku in any way she can after hearing about everything that happened to her on those early years. Not because she saw Shizuku as the person she admired, but because just like Shizuku, Kaori also had special feelings for her as well, and she even wrote this in her diary saying that she did truly love her, which you can only imagine what was going on in Shizuku's mind upon seeing this. This basically pretty much confirms that had both of them been honest with how they feel towards each other, they both could have been a real thing much sooner. And this is something that Shizuku would always treasure, and it will always be something that she will never forget. No matter how much time has passed, she will never forget Kaori, and now that she's realized this, she is now going to approach life differently. And we see this after summer vacation ends, in which we see that Shizuku is no longer isolating herself, and she's not only trying to be more open, but she's also trying to communicate with other people from her class, as she realizes that this is something that she probably wouldn't have done anytime soon without Kaori's influence. And it's because Kaori's influence that she is who she is now, thanks to her. That was Kaori's ultimate goal at the end of the day. Kaori wanted Shizuku to live and enjoy her life from now on, and even if she's not there anymore, Shizuku isn't going to no longer be her old self, because even Shizuku knows that her doing that would just be her destroying everything Kaori did for her, and that is the last thing she ever wants to do. And that is how the summer You Were There ends, a bittersweet story that despite Shizuku being able to get her life together and being able to see it differently, the person that she wanted to do it from now on is no longer part of this world. And that is just something very heartbreaking, because I think anybody who's ever had that special someone no longer be in their world anymore because of unfortunate circumstances. It's not easy to overcome it, and it's not easy to keep moving forward after that. But I think when this story is able to demonstrate that no matter what happens, all we can really do is keep moving forward, but also being able to cherish the memories that we had with that special someone. Even if they're not here anymore, the memories that you created with that person will never be forgotten, as long as you're able to remember that said person for the rest of your life. And I really am shocked, to be honest, that this has not gotten an anime adaptation. This is still something that should be deserving of an anime adaptation because of just how great this story is. And even if an anime adaptation isn't possible, I still will be perfectly fine if they adapt it into a movie, because if that were to happen, I would still watch it. Because The Summer You Were There is one of those stories that I think everyone should read, and if not, I think it should also be something that should be put on the screen, because then it will get more attention and many people will realize just how beautiful and emotional this series is. So if you haven't read the manga, I highly recommend you read it, because it's not that long. It's only over 30 chapters, which is something that anybody could finish if you have the time. But yeah, good series, highly recommended. And with that, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.